The doors?
Dwarves.
Oh, dwarves.
7 dwarves.
Oh.
Snow White, 7 dwarves that were minors.
Just a little.
Well, good
They were under
morning.
21
My name is Norm
too.
Ellis. This is the Adult One Bible Study class at Grace Baptist Church. Glad you're with us. We're about to start in just a few moments. Alrighty, so we're in the book of Micah. Like I said before, this is the second installment, if you will. And there's not much to the book of Micah, but
It relates to now what's going on.
yes, it does.
Truly.
Yes, it does.
Truly.
And there's some really impactful parts of Micah.
Yeah.
For instance, God gave Micah a glimpse of where the Messiah was to be born in Micah.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, I
kinda
haven't
cool.
got that part
Oh.
yet. Maybe. Oh, the birth of the king. Yeah. It's
Yes,
5.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so anyway, I like it for a minor prophet. I like it. It's not my top one. I still love Jonah so much.
Right.
Yeah.
Can't help it. But Micah is great, a great book for one of the minor prophets, like I said before.
Jonah's got funny stuff.
Yes, it does. Yes. Anyway, so today the title is Humble Beginnings. Humble Beginnings. And we're in chapter 4 and 5 of Micah. And we're going to be talking about this main idea that peace and security come through obedience to God. And I've got that written up here. A little statement there in blue. I don't know if you online can read it or not. Probably not. It's kind of hard to see some of those things on the board, I know. And we're going to look at these 3 points in the book of Micah, chapter 4 and 5. The first one is in that day. We're going to be beginning in verse 6 through 8 of Micah 4. And then the second point we'll be looking at is one will come. And that's in Micah chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. And the third point is then the remnant. Then the remnant. Micah 5, 7 through 9. So this will give us a taste of these things here. Obviously, we're not going deep into all the verses in Micah, but I will be reading some of the text before that just to give us a little context, because I like to do that. Let me see where's there it is. Anyway, glad to have you all here today. We're going to start here with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for all you've done for us, Lord, for the many blessings you give us, and for how you comfort us, Lord, during times of distress. I think specifically of my brother Marvin right now, who lost his wife Donna this week, and also for the rest of the family, too, Lord, Jasmine, Darren, and others, Lord. And I just pray for them now during this time of grief and loss. I also pray for those that are on their way here, keep them safe, and I just pray for those that are online watching at home. And I just pray that these verses will come alive, just like they did when Micah first penned them, Lord. Thank you so much for all you've done in your Son's name. Amen. So, peace and security come through obedience to God. Now, how does that connect to the title, Humble Beginnings? I always scratch my head over some of these titles. And the main thing, I think, is humble beginnings in the sense of we're talking about the kind of the underlying theme is how God uses humble people. He used Abraham. Abraham, who's he? And he, from that one person, the nation of Israel was formed, right? And I think that's along those lines is what they're talking about when they use the term humble beginnings, because we're going to be talking about this a little bit here about how God used a remnant. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a moment here, or do I want to do it now? Nah, we'll do the introduction first. Do the intro first. So, on the first page of our lesson book, actually, I'm going to read that part of the introduction. It says, we know about sports fans, right, who stopped watching a game sometimes because there's no way that their team is going to win. Oh, this other team's so highly rated, and oh, look, they've already been scored on twice, right? So they do what? They get discouraged. They turn it to a different channel, watch something else. Then they hear something in the news. Did you see that comeback, George? Yes, I did, Dave. It was the most fantastic one of all time. Oh, no. Yes, it was. And they came back. Only discovered they had missed one of the greatest comebacks in the team's history. So there are times when things appear hopeless, right? Also for God's people as well. Things seemed hopeless. and we're going to be talking about Israel and Judah here. But no matter how hopeless the situation seems, in the end, God will do what seems impossible and will turn their sorrow into joy through his Lord Jesus Christ, who will reign for eternity. So has there ever been a time when you found yourself rooting for the underdog?
Always.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to do that. Unless it's a team like the Seahawks that I want to win no matter what, or something like that. It's I look at the two teams and I say, okay, that one's been winning every game. That one's only won about half their games. All right, go, knock off that guy.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, I watched a game where that happened. When the Eagles, they were 8-0.
Yeah.
I watched the game where who was that to beat them now? I can't remember who it was to beat. But anyway, they were highly ranked. They were expected to do it, and they beat them. It's like
it was really good. Yeah.
it was great. I love that game. And I'm not a big football fan per se, like my wife is.
It's like a good game. Yeah.
It's funny how that is. Can you close that door a little bit? It is a little chilly. I did turn this on, so it's been on actually overnight. I just left it kind of low. But anyway, so it's fun to do that sometimes, right? Root for the underdog and then have the underdog win, right? So, and also ask another question here. What is your favorite rags to riches story? You ever hear of a rags to riches type of thing? Anybody? What's your favorite one you've maybe heard so far?
My cousin, and this is
Uh-huh.
Alabama, right? She married a gentleman, and he had money. It was her second marriage,
Right.
but he had a huge rag to riches story.
Oh, really?
He put a patent on. Do you guys remember what like the paneling looked like in a motorhome or a mobile home? It's kind of shiny brown.
Yeah.
Like for
He put a patent on that.
Oh, really?
And he had manufacturer in Birmingham, somewhere up around the Great Lakes, the Chicago area, Portland, and somewhere in Southern California.
Wow.
And he would buy his wife a Cadillac every
Wow.
Christmas, right? And so when I met him, I was expecting
Uh-huh.
this prim and proper rich guy,
Right.
right? Met him, they came to Portland, so we went to visit. And we get out of the car, and my mom says, "Oh, there's Raymond right there." And I'm looking around.
Nobody
All-
paint your idea about what he should look like.
Yes, all I see is this guy in a pair of jeans and
Uh-huh.
a polo shirt. And sure enough, and he said that he would never let his status now, his money status now,
Yeah.
affect how he grew up.
Wow.
And he grew up
Yeah.
Yeah.
not poor, but lower middle class. So yes,
There's a lot of those kind of stories around, isn't there?
yes.
I don't know if you know much about this product that used to be called liquid paper, whiteout.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the person who came up with that was actually Mrs. Naismith, I think.
Yeah, Michael Nesmith.
Nesmith. Yeah. Who, if you know anything about,
Right.
no, not Naismith, Nismith.
No.
Nesmith.
Oh.
It's close, but he's one of the monkeys.
Oh. Okay.
One of the monkeys.
Tall one with the
Yeah.
stocking cap.
His was it his mother that came up with that? Yeah, came up with that, and apparently, I mean, it basically took off.
She was a secretary,
Yeah,
and
typist.
she admitted she was really bad typist. So she started experimenting at home and made this stuff,
Yeah,
and then sold it.
Yep.
Yeah.
it made a bunch of money, a whole bunch of money.
Now it's
Yeah.
well, you can still find it occasionally,
Yeah.
but more often since you're typing everything on computers.
Yeah, it's still
It's still out
It's
there.
still out there.
Yeah.
Anyway, but there's a lot of those kind of stories, isn't there? A lot of those stories, and usually, we're always amazed how that happens. When we see a rags to riches thing, or you see the underdog win. So these kind of situations, do they have an impact on that person in the future? I think of
Most
another one. I
definitely.
think it was Bill Gates and somebody else was in a garage, and tinkering around with their machine or software, whatever it was. I forgot who it was.
It was Apple.
Apple, yeah. And they came up with the Apple computer, and oh my lord, things like that, right? You hear about those things. Did it impact them? Did that thing impact them? Oh yes, it did.
Just a
A
little.
little bit, right? Phil Knight, I think was the other guy, right? Phil Knight.
No, Phil Knight was Nike.
And that was
Yes,
Nike.
Nike.
Oh, I can't remember the other guy's name. Anyway,
Yeah.
But those kind of things do impact you.
Right.
It
And
impacts
if it
that
wasn't,
person,
if it
right?
wasn't for Bill Gates and Microsoft, Apple wouldn't be around.
Yeah.
Oh, Wozniak.
Yeah, true.
Wozniak, that's right. Wozniak, yeah.
That was the sidekick. Yeah, that's right. Steve Jobs and Wozniak. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's it. Anyway, so in today's study in Micah, we're reminded on how God uses humble beginnings to change the world. Micah painted a picture of peace and security for those who fully trust in the Lord. And that's part of the humble beginnings, is because part of the scripture we're looking at today is talking about that coming Messiah. And a little bit about that, just a taste, just a glimpse of what that's going to be. And we know what about Jesus? Where was he born? In a palace?
No.
Very humble
Yeah.
beginning, right? So that's probably where they got that title again, from that part there. Anyway, some of the things we've been going through, and I want to give you a resource for that is, and we're not going to go through it or anything necessarily, but is the role of a prophet. What is a prophet supposed to do? So if you look at handout number two, it talks about the role of a prophet. And if you at home watching want a copy of these notes, just let me know. Get the word to me what your email is, and I'll make sure you get them. But anyway, this talks about the role of a prophet here and what they do. Not just Micah, actually. Isaiah is mentioned, Jeremiah is mentioned, I think. Several others. Nathan, Jonah, different things like that. But it just gives us some good information about what a prophet does, and what's the purpose of what they do. Also, what is the context of where we've been studying? Let's look at that really quick too. And I think that's also in the book on page 110. Talks a little bit about that, and I like to always get that figured out so that we know where this thing we're talking about today comes from and what's going on. In this section of the book of Micah, it says on page 110, Micah reveals that someday in the future, God will establish himself as the one true king who will eternally reign over his people on all the nations from Mount Zion. He will do this by replacing Israel's wicked kings with his own king, who will shepherd them. Even though Micah prophesied that the temple would be destroyed in the near future, sometime beyond it would again be established on Mount Zion. Okay, the Lord will I'm going to jump ahead. The Lord will establish peace on earth, right? People will walk with the Lord, right? And this will be for eternity. They will, before the people of God experience restoration, though, they're going to have what? A time of difficulty, a time of exile. Remember what's going to happen? He'd been prophesying that the northern kingdom, which is called Israel, would go into exile first. And they would go, Assyria would come down and take them out. And then after that, he said, the southern kingdom would also be taken away into exile. And they'd be going to Babylon. So this is going to be a difficult time, but they were supposed to hold on to this hope of this coming Messiah. And we still are looking for that second coming of Jesus, aren't we? He came the first time, he's going to come the second time with power. So in chapter 5, Micah returned to the message of Judah's imminent judgment as its enemies lay siege to it, the Babylonians. These enemies would prevail and then strike Israel's ruler on the cheek with a rod, it says. And Micah then revealed that God was planning to raise up a new king who would be born in Bethlehem. And that's neat. This king's origin is from antiquity, it says, and he will shepherd his people. They will be their peace, and his greatness will extend to the ends of the earth. It says, for some among the nations, remnant of Jacob will be a blessing. For others, it will be like a roaring lion bringing death or judgment. What's more, God would eradicate his people's ungodly practices from among them and take vengeance against the nations that destroyed him. So we see that, yes, there's going to be a time of judgment, right? But don't worry, God's in control. God's going to raise that remnant up. And that's what we're talking a little bit about here on these things. So let's see. Where was it? Make sure I didn't forget that. Oh, Micah. I want to read that first. I'm going to read a little bit of background here for the verses first. I'm going to read Micah chapter 4, verse 1 through 5. And we're going to emphasize on verse 5 when I get to it. And it will come about in the last days that the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains. It will be raised above the hills, and the people will stream to it. Many nations will come and say, come and let us go to the mountain of the Lord and to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us about his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For from Zion will go forth the law, even the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he will judge between many peoples and render decisions for mighty distant nations. Then they will hammer their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they train for war. Each of them will sit under their own vine and under their own fig tree, and with no one to make them afraid, for the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken. And then verse 5. Though all the peoples walk each in the name of his or her God, as for us, we will walk in the name of the Lord. And the impression here is Yahweh, our God forever and ever. So Micah is saying that's what will happen. And that's going to be a glorious time. I forgot about my verses. I have some verses. Who would like to read some verses for me? Any volunteers?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Where's Phil when you need him?
I know.
We used to, Phil, we would always give Phil the big
Where's
one.
Phil? Phil, if you're watching, we're missing you. Well, Tina especially, she got the long verse. All right. And we do miss Phil and Rhoda. So, the Lord will gather to himself all the injured and lame who have been scattered in exile, with his remnant build an eternally strong nation. Okay? Let's see. Do I want to hit that first one out? Let me see. Where am I in this thing? Hold on just a moment. We'll take a look at this. Yeah, we'll discuss that in this first group here.
Is Mount Zion in Jerusalem?
It's used interchangeably, Mount Zion to be Jerusalem, that area.
It is?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and read the first few verses. And for these first 3 verses, I want you to listen for God's action on behalf of his people. What actions do we see? This is in chapter 4, verses 6 through 8. After the ones I just read, these come here. So who's got number 1 for me?
All right, I got it.
Okay, good.
In that day, declares the Lord, I will assemble the lame and gather the outcasts, even those whom I have afflicted. I will make the lame a remnant, and the outcasts a strong nation, and the Lord will reign over them in Mount Zion from now on and forever. As for you, tower of the flock, hill of the daughter of Zion, to you it will come, even the former dominion will come, the kingdom of the daughter of Jerusalem.
You know, it's kind of. Did I forget to put that verse down? Oh man. No, I'm not going to find it. Okay. All right. Well, this is a good spot to talk about remnant. Okay. What is the definition of remnant? What comes to mind when you hear that word?
The leftovers, the remaining.
Yeah.
I think of material.
Material. Yeah.
Yeah, the last of the material.
The part you didn't use.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else?
A small remaining quantity of something.
Oh, somebody looked it up.
Oh.
Yeah. Matter of fact, you just quoted directly from my definition, which is on the handout. Now you know where I got it, don't you? If you look at handout number 1, the first page, I got a little thing about remnant. Because sometimes we use these words, and what do they mean? You know, we don't define them. So I like to do that, especially a keyword like this. It's a small remaining quantity of something, like I think Steve just said. And it's many times used to describe a piece of cloth or carpeting that's left when the greater part has been used. It's a surviving trace. Also, people who have survived a major catastrophe or disaster. That can also be called a remnant. Related words, leftovers, I think Joe said that, leavings, remainder, remains, and there's some others probably besides that. But we want to know what it means in the Bible, don't we? Yeah. So in the Bible, the word remnant is used to describe those who are left over as regards to refugees who are most often the people of Israel. Okay, they are the object of God's redemptive and restorative actions. An example, for instance, we all know this, right, about the Great Flood. And who survived the flood?
Noah's family.
Noah and his family.
Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives.
So would you say they were a
a whole
remnant?
bunch of animals.
Would you say they were a remnant? Yes, they were. Matter of fact, you're right. The animals were remnant as well, too, in this case. But we're focusing, of course, on humanity. They were that remnant. And what did God use this remnant to do?
The Start over.
Start all over, repopulate the whole earth, right? That's exciting to think about that. So anyway, it goes on even more so when referring to those who remain in the land after the deportation of the Jews to Assyria and then also to Babylon. Did they take everybody in the deportations? No.
There were some left over.
They left who? The best?
The very, very poor.
The very poor. The physically ailing, like the lame ones, the blind ones, those that couldn't be useful to them. They left them behind. They're leftovers.
They took too much energy and necessity to keep them going, so you just leave them.
Well, if you're the conquerors, you make the rules. And the rules was we're taking the best and brightest and smartest and strongest. We'll leave the rest behind because they're just going to be in the way. It'll be a drag, right, on our.
There'll be a hindrance.
Yeah.
Getting back.
So there was those who remained, and they are the remnant also. Okay. Let's see. It can also refer to Jews who came out of exile and returned to Israel. Did everyone come back from exile? No. Actually, I've never seen a breakdown of this, but I believe it's less than 50% of the people probably came back. I don't know how you'd figure it out even, but a lot of them had done what? Integrated into that society.
They acclimated.
Yeah, they acclimated to wherever they were put. Like in Assyria or their places they put them in. Because they basically said, you guys are going to go here, you guys are going to go over there, you guys are going to go there. Because they needed labor and they needed people. And the Babylonians did similar things. But I know in Babylon, that Babylon did that with every country just about. And they had a homogenized, there's a big $10 word, group of people that were a part of that empire. And their idea was, we'll take the best and brightest and make our society great. And that's what they did, right? Remember Daniel? He was, and his three friends. Same thing happened there. So anyway, a lot of these people, though, after years go by, they get married, they have children, maybe with the people around them, and they shouldn't have, but they did, and they forget about certain things. So when the restoration happened, and people were able to come back, many of them said, go back where? That's not my home. My home's right here. So we had a remnant come back. A smaller amount, right? So it can be used to talk about that. So the Jews that came out of exile were also considered a remnant. It says in Amos 9, 8, the last half says, nevertheless, I will not totally destroy the house of house of Jacob, declares the Lord. So remnant is also used in prophecy, especially heralding. This is the verse I was looking for. No wonder I didn't forget it. Heralding the coming Messiah, as in Isaiah 11:1. And it says what? It says, a shoot will come up from the stump, the remnant of Jesse. From his roots, a branch will bear fruit. So that tree, the symbol of Israel is many times an olive tree. And so the picture was this tree was cut down when they went to exile, right? When they went into judgment because of their sins, right? And all you had was a stump. So who's going to look at a stump and care about it? No one. But out of that stump, shoot comes up. So it's a picture of what? Life.
Yeah.
Right? New life. Restored life. And that's the exciting thing that God does. He takes this thing that nobody would look at, this stump, and he uses it for his glory. And from that stump came Jesus. You got the gold star today. Exactly right. Messiah, right? Yay! So from that stump, that remnant, that leftover thing that nobody looked at, comes that branch of Jesse, which is Jesus, the Messiah, was born from that, right? Is that exciting? I think it's exciting. So anyway, so we define remnant here. I got a little involved in that. Sorry about that. And we talked about these first few verses, right? What is he going to do in that day? That day of being restored? What's he going to do? Verse 6. Verse 6 and 7, we'll say.
Gather the outcast.
Gather those that were the worthless ones. Those little remnant pieces of scrap that nobody cared about. God's going to gather them together. So are we part of that also as well? Are we part of that remnant, if you will?
I hope so.
I hope so too, yeah. He will. We are also part of that, right? And I will make the lame a remnant. So those people that were looked over are now part of that family that's going to be restored, that godly family, right? and the Lord will reign over them in Mount Zion from now and forever. Now, Mount Zion is we talked about this a little bit before. It's a symbol, but it's also a synonym for Jerusalem, which is the center of the Jewish religion, community, whatever we call it. And so we use that in a way sometimes to just refer to that time of reign of God.
It's not where that Muslim temple is.
No.
That's not Mount Zion, right?
Well, not in the sense that this is being used as a metaphor, if you want. What's the word I'm looking for? Something to use instead of other things to get you an idea of it. When you go to Mount Zion, you're going to that experience with God, right? We hear a lot of Christian songs in town. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. It's all referring to that time of God's reign. Okay. Now here they're probably thinking directly of Jerusalem back then when Micah said this, because that was a center of religious worship. That's where the temple was. But yes, on what's called the Temple Mount currently is the Mosque of Omar, which is a Islamic thing. They put it on top of there because they knew that was the center of Jewish worship, and what better way to subject the people you've conquered than by putting your thing in their place.
Yeah.
So there's still a remnant of the wall, using the word remnant, that used to be part of the temple. It's called the Wailing Wall. You may have heard that term before. And so it's the last parts of that thing, and the Jews will go there to many times pray.
Right.
Anyway, but when you hear the word Zion, it's not necessarily meaning has to be that place, that piece of real estate, is what I'm getting at.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. And it says, as for you, tower of the flock, hill of the daughter of Zion, it will, to you it will come. Even the former dominion will come, the kingdom of the daughter of Jerusalem. So what is that? When they hear these verses, what does you think their impulse is to do, the people? Be happy or be sad?
Oh, they'd be happy.
They'd be happy, right? Because previous to this, in verses 1 through 3, I think it was, Micah was talking about the judgment that was going to come upon them. You know, the terrible judgment that's going to come upon Israel and then Judah. And there's no way you can escape it. You're going to go through it. And now he's giving them what?
Hope.
That hope, right. That hope. So why would hope be important for these people?
For the same reason it's important to us today.
They're the remnant, right? They're the people,
Yeah.
downtrodden, and then
Right. Now, a lot of this stuff is future still for them. Because they haven't been taken over by the Babylonians yet.
Oh, okay.
I think the Assyrians may have attacked them at this point, the northern kingdom. But it's basically so when they do experience these things, they'll remember. This is what Micah said would happen. We need to remember the rest of his words. The rest of the words is going to be a remnant will survive and will be worshiping God. You know. So will this give them hope when they're in that time of exile? It will.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the whole purpose of this. God wanted them to realize, yes, you're going to have to go through a time of judgment for your sins, but I'm going to restore you. I'm going to redeem you. I'm going to buy you back, like that picture of Hosea buying back his wife Gomer from prostitution. It's the same kind of thing here. This is the picture of redemption, and this is when this happens. It's going to be a glorious time. That's what he's basically trying to say. So does this show who's in charge of the world?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so we use this word sovereignty, which is a big $10 word, which means God is sovereign. He is in control. He is that person who can say yay or nay to everything in life, right? He is that the driving force in everything. So we forget that sometimes. We sometimes think we have a lot more autonomy than we do as humans. Well, I love the people nowadays say, "Oh yeah, we can control the climate. Oh yeah, we can make it hot. We can make it warm. Yeah. Wow, we got lots of power, don't we? No, we don't.
There's this line I like. It says, "You can tell God your plans," and then He laughs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Exactly right. So anyway, in the last paragraph, I'm looking. Okay, this is talking about the verses we just read, and I think in the lesson book it talks about that. It's about in that day. It says, a day was coming when God would assemble a people out of those who had been scattered, a people who would return to Jerusalem, and God would establish them and rule over them forever. This promise for the future set the stage for the big birth announcement found in the next chapter of Micah's prophecy. So how does the promise of a future bring hope when enduring God's discipline at the time. We kind of talked about that already. It does, doesn't it? Does it encourage us during those hard times to know that God's really in charge?
That things aren't gonna stay the way in your life,
Yes.
they will.
Yes.
Should improve.
It does. It definitely does. So Micah told about a future ruler. We're going to talk about this next. Born in Bethlehem. We're getting a glimpse now of this coming Messiah here, who would lead after the remnant returned from exile. This humble ruler would shepherd God's people, instituting peace throughout all the earth. We talked about shepherding a little bit last week too, if I remember right. And we know that shepherding in the Middle East works in what way? Do they have a big old whip? Go, sheep, go! No, they don't do it that way. In the Middle East, they do it a little differently. And sometimes you see shepherding with dogs and stuff, driving sheep. But in the Middle East, back then, they did not do it that way. The shepherd knew his sheep. You know, he probably knew them by name. He probably would call. He would apparently the shepherd knew. The sheep knew the shepherd's voice. That's what I was trying to say. At night, all the shepherds would come down out of the hills and they put them into what's called the sheepfold, which is a big enclosure for protection because there's a lot of predators and stuff back then. They had wolves and other things that would get the sheep out in the open. So they protect the sheep. And in the morning, when they went out to bring the sheep out to the different pastures and stuff like that, the sheep would follow the voice of that shepherd. They would separate from the other big group of sheep and they'd follow that because that sheep knew the shepherd cared about them. The shepherd brought them to those places where there's lush places to eat. The shepherd brought them to the waters that were good to drink and all that stuff. So they trusted the shepherd and they followed him. And so it's a different picture than we have sometimes of a shepherd. We have a picture of a shepherd driving them. They didn't drive them. They led them. They got out in front and they led them. So this is what they're expecting for this Messiah to come, would be that shepherd who would shepherd the people of God. So let's look at the next next verses here. Any questions about that first area? Okay, let's look at chapter 5 now, verses 1 through 6. Chapter 5, verses 1 through 6.
I have.
And I think you got the one that should have went to Phil. But for these next verses, and there's 6 of them, think about how what Micah said also impacts our lives today. Not just their lives, but ours as well. Go ahead and read those verses.
Now muster yourselves in troops, daughter of troops. They have laid siege against us. With a rod they will smite the judge of Israel on the cheek. I love that word, smite. But as for you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, did I pronounce that right? Too little to be among the clans of Judah. From you one will go forth, for me to be a ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. Therefore he will give them up until the time when she who is in labor has bore a child. Then the remainder of his brethren will return to the sons of Israel, and he will arise and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they will remain, because at that time he will be great. To the ends of the earth, this one will be our peace. When the Assyrian invades our land, he will trample on the citadels. Then he will arise against them, 7 shepherds and 8 leaders of men. They will shepherd the land of Assyria with a sword, the land of Nimrod at its entrance, and he will deliver us from the Assyrian when he attacks the land and he tramples the territory. Our territory, excuse me.
So there's a lot going on in these verses, and I know that. Some of them we may or may not understand because we would have to have been there at that time, okay, what he's talking about, the different things here. But there is some interesting settings here, and I think it talks about that in the book. Where was I? Yeah, page 113, I think I saw that. Oh yeah, okay. After the message of hope in Micah 4:6-8, the prophet had some realistic words about what his nation would face prior to the fulfillment of that promise. They would have no king to guide them. They would be taken into captivity in Babylon. And by the way, he's talking about Judah there, and the Syrians have already been taken into captivity. They would be surrounded by nations who hated them and be required to do harsh physical labor. The first verse of chapter 5 continued to explore the harshness of the moment. Verse 1 says that God's people would come under siege. That would be a reference to the attack of Assyria when Sennacherib laid siege to Jerusalem in 701 BC. But it most likely refers to the coming siege by Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon later on. Jerusalem would be spared the former attack, but the latter one would devastate Jerusalem and lead the people into exile. When Sennacherib, he kind of failed to take the whole city, right? But Nebuchadnezzar, no, you're going. he crushed them, right? The enemies of God's people would not only attack the city, but would humiliate its leaders by striking Israel's ruler on the cheek with a rod. And this was a gesture of contempt. In the Middle East, if you take your bottom of your shoe and show it to somebody, that's a sign of contempt. There's a lot of things like that. If you strike somebody in the cheek, that's a sign of contempt. And so that's what they're talking here. And they used a rod to do that in this particular thing. Anyway, this was a gesture of contempt. This could have been a prophecy of the last king of Judah, Zedekiah, who was captured in Jericho while fleeing from the Babylonians. His sons were put to death before him, and then his eyes were put out. So this would be the last thing he saw. It's terrible. This was a period of utter humiliation for Judah. All hope appeared gone. It says, from least likely places, though, there is hope. And we're going to talk about that a little bit here. So that's kind of the historical setting for this. And it could also be they're talking about striking them on the cheek with a rod. It could be talking about all of Israel. Okay, they might, because in a sense, we're the personification of something to represent the whole. But it very well could have been, like he said, we were talking about this one king who was basically humiliated and then blinded and stuff. It was a terrible time. So anyway, then he said, then the verse that is so interesting that they turned to when the wise men said, "Hey, where's the king of the Jews?" And the scribes scratched their heads. I don't know. Let's just go check, and they find, oh yeah, in Bethlehem. That's where this king of the Jews is going to be born. They knew where he was going to be born, but they didn't want to worship him. Isn't that sad? Think about that. So anyway, so this is the verses they looked at. They looked in the prophets and found that, and they said, that's where he is. So when you found him, and you've got done worshiping, come back and tell me, said Herod. So I could go worship.
Worship also, yes.
We all know how that turned out. Anyway, but this is that word of hope now. That yes, you're going to go into exile. Yes, terrible things. You're going to be humiliated. But guess what? There's a king coming who's going to take charge of all these things, right? And he's going to be born of a woman, it says, in a humble way. Because, first of all, what was Bethlehem? Was it a metropolitan area that was, you had to go to Bethlehem before you get anything work done and all that?
Backwater.
It was a backwater, yeah.
Well, that's a good way of
That's
putting
a
it.
very good way. Everything sort of went past Bethlehem. It was a little village, just a little ways away from Jerusalem. Not far. But is that where you expect to see a king rise up out of there? No. However, who was born in Bethlehem that was also very important to the Jews?
Another prophet, somebody.
No. A king. David.
Oh, King David.
Yeah.
Yeah.
King David. Yeah. He was born in Bethlehem. And so this is a very critical thing also. So we see how Bethlehem may be in a backwater, but is it a key component?
Yeah.
Very key.
Yeah.
Very key. So anyway, see a lot of that stuff going on. It says one will come. Even though you're going through this, keep that hope. That one will come. And that one who comes, what will he be doing? What will be the way he leads? I'll give you a hint. It's in verse 4.
In his majesty, or in the majesty of the name of the Lord God.
Before that part.
Oh.
Just a little bit before that. On verse
Strength.
Verse 4.
I'll get there.
Verse 4. The first part of verse 4.
He will stand and shepherd his flock with strength.
So
in the strength.
yeah. So he will arise. He will stand up. That's a figure. That's showing importance. It shows authority, right? And then he will do what to his flock? Shepherd his flock. Now remember, when they hear that word shepherd, what are they thinking of? They're
Being taken care of.
Being taken care of. Yeah. Caring for those sheep. Putting your life on the line to protect those sheep. Showing the sheep the best places to eat, the best water to drink from, right? And a perfect picture of that is Psalms 23, by the way. You know? But anyway, we won't go into that song. We don't have time. Anyway, so that's that picture of, that's who the king will be. Will be a shepherd king. A shepherd king. Not like these other kings who rule with an iron fist, right? Who you shake when you see that they're coming to your area of town or something like that. You know, what's wrong? What are they going to do to us now? No, it won't be that kind of thing at all. It won't be that kind of thing at all. Unless, of course, you're against him. Because he talks about that too, doesn't he?
We still see it that way sometimes in today's society.
Mm-hmm.
Look how we are in awe of the big physical man.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
So, or the successful a woman who's has power or
Right.
whatever. We what's the word I'm looking for? We are in awe of that today sometimes.
Yeah, and it's a very human response.
Yes.
Yeah. When they wanted their first king, Israel picked somebody who was a head and shoulders above everybody else, King Saul. It wasn't God's pick.
No.
That was the people's pick. And of course Saul messed up everything. And so then the next king was David, a lowly shepherd boy, you know, and the least in the family of Jesse. You know, who'd pick that boy who was tending to sheep? You'd want the firstborn, that nice looking guy over there, to be king, right? Or maybe the next one, The next one. Is that all that you have? Well, we have this one kid out here watching sheep. The prophet says, bring him in too. He's the one. The prophet said, he's the one. Anyway, so I love that story too. Where are we in this thing? Oh, okay. So God used the unexpected, didn't he? He uses the unexpected to reveal himself. And that's somebody who's from a humble beginnings, right? This information about the promised king is very interesting to see. He's not coming with a big sword to kill everybody and conquer them necessarily, right? He's coming to shepherd his people, to take care of them. Now, he will take care of the enemies with a sword. We know that. But his people, no.
You were saying something about.
Oh, peace is the key thing there. Go ahead. What you were going to say?
Were you saying Jesse earlier?
Jesse was the father of David. So when they talk about the root of Jesse, they're talking about that line of kings that God promised the Messiah would come from, and David was what? The son of Jesse. So when you hear the root of Jesse, that just means from that lineage of King David.
Okay. I've never heard the name Jesse before. I didn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jesse was the father who had all these sons. You know, and that one son, David, was way out in the field when the prophet came to find that king. That's the story I was talking about. But anyway, yes, it's a way. They always talked about where you came from, so you'd remember that person. Like I would be considered Norm, son of Martin. Yeah, my dad's name was Martin. They know my dad. They wouldn't know me. So who are you? Oh, Martin. Yes. Oh, you're his son. Oh, okay. So I had that connection. That's how why they did that. And they rang the bell on me. How dare they do that?
It rang early, didn't it?
No. No, I don't think so. Actually, they're talking about changing the times a little bit too.
They have.
I don't like change. I hate change. Anyway, so
Get used to it.
this King David, this king that comes in the line of David, that Messiah would bring something special. He would bring that peace that they wanted, and that wouldn't just be peace from absence of war, but it'd be peace with God. Peace with God. And that's what we're talking about. Let's look at the last verses here. The remnant. And this is where we talked about remnant already, so it helps us keep that in mind. So for our last 3 verses, I want you to notice how the remnant will be a testimony of the gracious hand of God. Go ahead and read that for us. So who's got number 3? Oh, you've got number 3. Paul does.
Then the remnant of Jacob will be among many peoples, like the dew from the Lord, like showers on vegetation, which do not wait for man, or delay for the sun to come. Then the remnant of Jacob will be among the nations, among many peoples, like a lion among the beasts of the forest, like the lion among the flocks of sheep, which if he passes through tramples down and tears, and there is none to rescue. Your hand will be lifted up against your adversaries, and all your enemies will be cut off.
So he's talking about this remnant now, the remnant of Jacob. This is those exiles, or those people that were left behind also, that were the for lack of the proper thing, the dregs of humanity that the conquerors didn't want, right? These people are the ones that come, that are being restored. And he uses some analogies here, like the dew, or like showers. Why do you think that's an important thing to the people there?
Oh, well, yeah, well, having moisture, I mean, that was, they're farmers, basically.
Yeah, they were suffering.
Yeah, and that was a refreshing thing, right? It would help their crops. It would refresh them personally, right? So that it's always a sign of God's blessing. When you ever see these showers or these
Showers of
dews,
blessings.
yeah, I was going to say, does it sound familiar? You've got ahead of me there. Showers of blessings we need. Mercy drops around us are falling, but for the showers we plead. That's one of the old hymns, right?
Yep.
So it's that connotation of God's blessing being showered or brought down upon us. It's refreshing in this dry land of the Middle East. Whenever you had those kind of situations, it was always like a breath of fresh air for them. Anyway, so what other characteristics we see here? We see like the dew. The remnant will be like the dew, like the showers of blessings. We talked about, right?
Is this the Jacob and Esau?
Okay, yes, and that's another name for Israel in general.
Is Jacob?
Yeah, Jacob.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
The
You know, in our
house
minds,
of
we would
Jacob.
like one thing to describe something, you know.
Yeah, makes it easy.
But they love to use little other names to show you where they came from. They came from this part, Jacob.
Depends on how they're talking, what they're trying to impart.
Yeah, the context of what they're actually saying there. But when they said Jacob, they know they meant Israel.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we need maybe a little thing up here to say, this is Israel. this is the other part. Because it is confusing, isn't it?
It might be in essence like if you're somewhere else in the United States and somebody asks you where you're from, you'll say Washington State.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you're inside of Washington State and somebody asks you where you're from,
That makes no sense.
I'm from Vancouver.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's the same place, but you're being
Yeah.
a little more generalistic or more, not general, it's what I'm thinking. Specific about where you're from and who you're talking to.
Right.
So
So anyway, what will happen to this weak little group of people? They're going to become
Good things
powerful.
happen.
They're going to become powerful, it says. You won't have to worry anymore. You will be like a lion, a young lion, which is full of power and energy, right? And the people will fear you because of your strength, because your strength is from God, who took care of you, who restored you, right? So it's just showing them that yes, you're going to be powerless during this time of exile, but you're going to be restored. You're going to have that power from the Lord, right? So is this going to give them hope and encouragement?
Yes.
Yes, it is. And they're getting ready to go in this time of exile, so they need that. They need this to hold on to. So we talked about some of the characteristics of the remnant. I was going to have us listed here, but they rang the bell on me, so I can't. But basically, we talked about what the remnant will be powerful, right? There will be a blessing because they'll be like the dew and the showers, right?
It was useful.
Yeah. Yes. Useful. Anything else? I think that's pretty good. We're not going to write that more because we're out of time. So I had a couple of questions here, but I'm just going to look at the main thing here. It says, God provided hope for the people of Israel with the promised return of a remnant of believers who would remain faithful to Him. As believers in today's world, we too are called to be faithful as well. So in our study, we'll look at these three areas. First point, summary point, is that Christians can find hope in God's promise of salvation. Did Israel find hope in that? Did it encourage them?
Yes.
They did. It did. Second point, Christians can experience God's peace through faith in Jesus. And the last point, all people must decide to trust God. Okay? They must be to be part of that remnant, they must trust God, don't they? So the challenge from our study today is for each of us to think about and examine to what extent we are being obedient to God and His promises, and what actions we need to take maybe to be that obedient child of God. Because that's kind of the key here, isn't it? following God, right? Being faithful witnesses for Him. Any questions or comments? A couple of questions they asked too, and we might just consider, and this is rhetorically, because we don't have time, but how can this gospel message be shared without coming off as just being judgmental? We sometimes worry about that, don't we? Well, you're a Bible thumper, you're just judging me, I think there's ways you can tell how God worked in your life, right? And you can see the changes that marked my life. This is the way I was, this is the way I am now. I'm not judging you, I'm just telling you what happened to me. Would you like to see this too in your life? And then you can talk to them about how you can become a Christian, right? Something like that would be a good way to approach it. Some people are going to get offended no matter what you do. I've run across them too. And because they're happy in their sins, or they just think it's going to be too hard to change. And, God will work in their hearts if it's meant to be.
Sometimes too angry.
Yeah, too angry. You're right. Things like that can happen in lives. Yeah. So anyway, be open to that though. Look for those opportunities to share with people, so they can be part of that remnant as well. Right. All right. Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. Then. Lord, thank you so much for this words from Micah, the prophet, so many years ago, who's trying to prepare these people before they went to exile of Babylon, Lord, and how he knew it was going to be a tough time for them, Lord. But he also knew how faithful you were, and that you were going to restore that Messiah that would be born in a little town that nobody thought anything of, and how that impacted the world, Lord. Help us to be that part of that impact as well as we share your gospel message with others who need to know about it to be part of that remnant as well. Thank you so much for all you've done. In your Son's name, amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you guys. Good discussion. Glad to have you with us. And for you online, glad to have you with us as well. Next week, I think, is our last, our last thing in Micah. And then we're going to the Gospel of John. I already have the books, so remind me next week to give you a copy of the study book, the lesson book, and I will get it to you. Hope to see you all again next week. Thank you for being here. We'll talk to you later.
All right, very good.
Thank you, Norm.
Try to stay warm.
Okay, see y'all later.
Yes.
Bye, guys.
Chilly out there.
Yes, it is.
All right, you guys take care.
Bye-bye.
But
Did I ever tell you guys that when the twins were getting old enough to know more than anyway, Tristan was always a little jealous that Micah's name was in the Bible.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Well, we picked biblical names for all our kids so that none of them would say that.
there are literary things out there where Tristan's name is in.
Yes, there is plenty of literary.
The first one that comes to mind is
Thank you for being with us
Tristan
today, and please stand by for Pastor Derek. He'll be preaching today on the same YouTube channel, and hopefully you can be involved with that online as well. And thank you for being with us. Bye. Can we get you to move that sort of?
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right. End stream.
All right, I'll see you guys upstairs. Am I missing anything? I don't think so.
All right. Well, I think it ended. Oh, looks like it ended.